Hi, this is Keeper, and welcome back to On Air. Glad you could join me. In 1975, the greatest challenge to direct selling took place as the Federal Trade Commission, the FTC, decided to take Amway to court over its business model. The business model we know as MLM, Network Marketing Direct Selling. It was a 4-year battle in which Amway came out on top. Luckily for those of us, the tens of millions of us around the world who are in direct selling, Amway won that case. It was a case in which the FTC decided to challenge Amway over its business model, calling it a pyramid scheme. If Amway had not won that case, direct selling as we know it would not exist today. It's quite possible this entire community, this entire industry would not exist. Today in 2013, another challenge to direct selling that could possibly be even more damaging is taking place as Bill Ackman, the manager and founder of Pershing Square Capital Management, has begun to target Herbalife to bring down its stock so he could take control of the company and rake in billions of dollars. At the same time, throwing millions of Herbalife distributors and their families' lives into limbo. The effect of this, if Bill Ackman and Pershing Square Capital Management were to win that stock battle, could be devastating to everyone in direct selling, as a domino effect can be begun to possibly take place with all publicly managed and publicly owned direct selling companies, possibly from Avon to Nu Skin to Manitech to Tupperware to many, many others. Today, we talk about this issue with MarketWave CEO and founder Len Clements, as he decides to tell us what we here in direct selling can do about it, what the stakes really are. So sit back and relax as we talk about Herbalife versus Ackman here today with Len Clements on Air.
When my mother used to sell Princess House.
Joined Amway that night.
Norma siempre vendía cosas de Avon.
Oh, it must have been around 1935.
But those knives were amazing.
The one lady's name was Mary Kay, and I said, oh, cosmetics will never sell on Party Plan.
Was a single mom and created these hair care products for black women and became the first self-made millionaire in the United States. I just think that's extraordinary.
Welcome to On Air. It has been a great month, certainly looking at February where we just celebrated Black History Month, but now it's time to get back into what we normally do and talk about the news that matters in direct selling. One of the biggest stories that's been going on for months is the Herbalife story, as it has been what I call being torpedoed by a major hedge fund manager, Bill Ackman, and his Pershing Square Capital Management Company. One of the people who happens to be most knowledgeable about this entire affair is Len Clements, the CEO and founder of MarketWave. Len is a very well-known consultant in direct selling and has a very keen interest in this because of the impact potentially that it could have on every direct seller and direct selling company, not just here in the United States, but globally. Len, welcome back to On Air.
Yeah, thank you, Keeper.
About this event, or about this case, about this battle between Herbalife, Ackman, and now you throw into the mix Carl Icahn of Icahn Enterprise. Am I saying this last name correctly?
I believe it's pronounced Icahn, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Carl Icahn, who's acquired a pretty good amount of stock with Herbalife in order to push back against Ackman. Kind of walk us through what's going on with this and why it is so important.
Well, it really goes back to early last year when another very well-known short seller, kind of one of these stock-picking gurus, a guy by the name of David Einhorn, got on an Herbalife call, an investor call, they have every quarter, and asked a couple of what should have been very innocuous questions. One of them was, how do you account for retail sales beyond your distributors? Well, of course, Herbalife couldn't answer that, just as no MLM company can answer that, because distributors don't keep track of that like they're supposed to, and even if you told them to do it, they wouldn't do it, and there's no way of knowing where that volume goes. A lot of it gets personally consumed, some get sampled, some get sold, so they had no way to answer that question. Nonetheless, by simply asking the question, Wall Street assumed David Einhorn, this big stock-picking guru, must be working on what they call short thesis of Herbalife, and he's going to attack them at the Irisone conference coming up here in a couple of weeks. That was a big conference where all these big guys come in and make their cases for why you should buy stock long or short.
Is that the call or around the month of May when a lot of this really started to pick up steam?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And their stock dropped something like 20% that day.
Right.
By David Einhorn simply asking the question and sort of what people thought maybe tipping his hand that maybe he's going to short Herbalife. And just so people know, short means you make money by the stock going down.
Right. If before we go further, because oftentimes stocks can be a bit beyond me. If I understand what it is that this guy is trying to do, Ackman, he's looking to essentially borrow stock, lights are coming back on, borrow stock in an effort to push the stock price down. Say he borrows the stock at $25. He hopes that it gets depressed down to $20 and then turns around, because he doesn't really own it, he turns around and then sells it back at $25, thereby making $5 on, because the stock price has been pushed down to $20.
Exactly.
So
you borrow at 25 and you sell it. You put 25 in your pocket. Then the guy you borrowed it from said, hey, I want my shares back. Oh, here's all your shares back, but now they're down to $20 a share.
Right.
So I buy them back at $20 a share, and you give him his shares back. He wants the number of shares back, not for the same price.
Correct.
So in that case, I would make a profit by the stock going down. So he shorts it by either just flat out shorting the stock, what they call put options, and then he goes out and attacks them and hopes their stock will go down, and then he makes money in that process. So, and we know now, by the way, when I originally wrote my report, which is on my website, no one knew this yet. We know now David Einhorn did short USANA stock back then, about the time he was asking this question. But he asked the question. He never mentioned Herbalife at the Irisone conference. And, of course, you can actually watch it live, the stock ticker, during the Irisone conference as David Einhorn is speaking. And the longer he speaks and the more it looks like he's not going to mention Herbalife, the more the stock goes up. And ends it, he walks off the stage and the stock pops. Hey, he didn't talk about Herbalife. And then, so who knows, maybe this is where Bill Ackman got clued in, like, oh, maybe I can do that too, who knows. But we know that him and Einhorn are friends, and they both spoke at the same conference back then. Next thing we know, Bill Ackman does the same thing, but never contacts Herbalife. Never asks them any questions about anything that he has some concerns about. This is how I make the distinction between honorable and dishonorable short sellers. Short selling is a very controversial practice because, again, you make money by people losing, by getting the stock to go down.
Right.
I'm not anti-short selling, by the way, just for the record. I've shorted stock in the past, usually right before their stock goes up. I'm not saying I'm good at it. I'm just saying I'm not against it. And by the way, I'm not short or long Herbalife or any MLM stock right now, but or never have been actually since all this started. So what Ackman did is he put out this big. He went to the Irisone conference.
The next one did this big Herbalife short thesis, 337 slide presentation of why they were an illegal pyramid scheme and should be just put out of business by the FTC.
Okay.
And the stock dropped. Of course, it plummeted. Now, we don't know exactly, because he's been very vague about this, when he bought or when he shorted the stock. But if he would have done it right before David Einhorn asked the question on the conference call, back when it was about $70 a share, at one point he would have been up $880 million. If it was after Einhorn-induced drop, he would have shorted it there. He still would have been up over $400 million.
Correct.
Now, the stock's come back since then, so there's some problems now. He may end up being what they call a short squeeze. In other words, not having anything to buy back, to give back. And The point is, though, he's made literally hundreds of millions of dollars on this short position based on this case that Herbalife's an illegal pyramid scheme. Besides all of the basic fundamental flaws, the historical, the mathematical, the legal, the logical flaws in his case, which are literally overwhelming, there's also
But even as he has the flaws, he is betting on public perception, or at least the perception of the press not doing their homework and coming to understand what's really happening here, correct?
Right, exactly, and they're not either, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for example, every time he says, I have no profit motive in this. This is blood money. I don't want this. He goes, everything I make from my personal short position, I'm going to donate to charity. And every time that he talks to in every interview, CNBC, Bloomberg, whoever, oh, well, then there's no profit motive in you doing this. It must be pure intentions to just do what's right. Well, yeah, except that he always says his personal short position. Well, Pershing Square Capital, his investment company, owns 20 million shares short. That one time was 97% of all the stock you could possibly short on Herbalife.
Right, right. So it's not his personal, but it has nothing to do with Pershing Square Capital.
It owns the 20 million shares.
Correct, correct.
But we know, because you have to report this publicly, that one of the only two places he's ever decided he's going to give his donation to, the charities, is his own charity, the Pershing Square Foundation, which, by the way, he has already donated over $100 million to, 55 million the last year he reported. So the money he's making from his personal short position on Herbalife, it's money he was already going to donate to charity anyway. It was just a matter of where the funds come from that covers the donation.
He's taking it from one hand, his right hand, and just essentially just sliding it over to his left hand.
Like he's actually said, win or lose, whether I make money on this or not, I'm going to give $25 million to the charity.
Yeah. So let me ask you, because most people in direct selling, most of the distributors are not going to understand the importance of this. You and I have talked about it a bit. You've done a lot more investigating into this. What is the impact to direct sellers, to direct selling companies? What are we looking at here?
Well, first of all, there's a domino effect to every publicly traded MLM company. Notice every time one of these events happen in Herbalife, you can almost track their stock chart to Nu Skin and USANA and all the other publicly traded MLM companies. And keep in mind that already what he's done to Herbalife has cost innocent shareholders of Herbalife stock well over $1 billion. That's their loss. These innocent shareholders.
And it's not just the shareholders, as you said. There is a domino effect. There's a trickle-down effect, which then goes down to the distributors as well. It impacts them and how they have their outlook with Herbalife, and impacts their customers because they're starting to catch bits and pieces of this in the news, oftentimes misrepresented, misinformation, and so they start to wonder, should I have any involvement with this company at all? So things start to sputter a bit.
Yeah, I mean, his goal, he's admitted this, is to get the FTC to do a formal investigation of them and to take them completely out, to get their stock to zero, which means completely destroy Herbalife, which means completely put 6,500 Herbalife employees out of business. You know, and their families and their children and all that will entail. Over 90,000 Herbalife distributors that are making a living by their Herbalife business or a significant profit that's changing their lives. Put all of them out of business.
According to Herbalife, they have globally around 3.2 million distributors. So it goes well beyond the 90,000. You just mentioned the FTC thing. Apparently, the FTC is investigating Herbalife at this time, as well as
the SEC. The SEC is doing it.
There are two, actually. There's the FTC investigation, which they haven't acknowledged just yet, but there's also the FCC as well. All of this plays into Ackman's drive to, as you said, drive Herbalife's value down to zero, so that he can turn around and make a lot of money. We're talking about billions of dollars at stake here.
Yeah, just so you know, Keeper, the SEC is what they call an informal inquiry. Everyone just calls it generically an investigation. Right. A formal investigation is serious. This is an informal inquiry. This is where they go into a company and they look for any little reason, any slightest sign of impropriety to escalate it to a formal investigation. The SEC, by the way, has already done this to Herbalife back in 2008 when Barry Minko essentially did the same thing that Ackman is doing. Barry Minko is now back in prison for stock fraud, by the way.
Right.
And they didn't find anything. They're not going to find anything this time either. They spent 10 months in the home office looking through everything at USANA and didn't find anything, even enough to escalate it to a formal investigation. So that's where the SEC is right now. It's not in an actual investigation. The FTC, the rumor was, and Ackman, of course, exploited this, that the FTC was investigating them, and this was actually bad journalism that really caused this, because through the Freedom of Information Act, they got a bunch of complaints that were filed with the FTC, and they asked the FTC for more information about the complaints, and the FTC said, we can't tell you more information about ongoing investigations. Oh, they must be investigating Herbalife. Since then, they've retracted that and come back and said, well, no, we didn't mean we were investigating Herbalife. I'm paraphrasing, obviously, but we just some of these particular things like in foreign markets or whatever, we can't look at what their actual complaints were, and they get all these other explanations for it. I don't want to get into it. The bottom line is the FTC has said that's not what we meant. We're not investigating Herbalife. So, but there was a lot of stuff out there for a while thinking, well, the FTC's tipped their hand. They're investigating. They're not investigating Herbalife. Only the SEC, and that's only an informal investigation.
Right, and as you said, that goes back quite a ways, just from your very typical complaint and things like this. What I find interesting about all of this is, from a direct selling standpoint, the Direct Selling Association, the DSA, they are very, very concerned about this. In this month's, which is the February edition of Direct Selling News, DSA President Joe Mariano goes into an extensive article that he wrote about the what he called a common danger will bring forth unity, meaning that this is not a possible one time or just one event issue. This could potentially balloon into much greater. As you said, we could be talking about a domino effect here. And Joe Mariano talks about there's going to need to be unity throughout the entire community. I emailed Joe Mariano a couple of weeks ago once I read this article and told him, look, I am in support of the DSA on this matter. Is there anything I can do to help? And one of the things that he said was, this is going to require all hands on deck at some point with this particular fight. What do you think?
Well, yeah, he's right, and I'm glad to hear him say that too, because back in the Minko attack, everybody in the industry saw it as, oh, that's a USANA problem. That's a Nu Skin problem, an Herbalife problem. Let them deal with it. I mean, it's an unfortunate thing about this business is that a lot of times companies and distributors like to see competitors attacked. One less we got to worry about. But understand, if he is successful in getting the FTC to investigate Herbalife based on the premise, which all boils down to what's commissionable product, and product purchased by distributors shouldn't be commissionable. It's kind of what it all boils down to. Then we're all in trouble. And that could have a domino effect all the way across the industry. However, Herbalife's always had a very good relationship with the FTC over the years, and there seems to be no indication that's going to happen. Not only that, but there's a lot of legal precedent that kind of already defines what's a legally commissionable product and what's not, so that's kind of actually going in our favor overall. But again, the FTC seems to be taking no action at all, and he has to have that happen. If the FTC doesn't take action, their stock's never going to go to zero. And in fact, if we can all get together, and by the way, Herbalife just presented a record quarter. They went up this last quarter while all this was happening. So the Herbalife distributors, they're very resilient, very committed people.
A lot of people thought that when Mark Hughes passed away, that, they're going to just fall apart and they're all going to leave and blah, blah, blah. And they all just galvanized. And they said, let's do this for Bill. And they really did. And they continued to grow. The same thing's happening here, too. So I think as an industry, we need to stop seeing this as an Herbalife problem and understand that if Ackman's successful in this, I mean, there's a whole bunch of publicly traded companies you could go after, one after the other, and do the same thing to. But right now, the initial reports are in and kind of shows he's failing. He has to make some money because especially if he bought it back before David Einhorn asked his question. But if it was after that, Ackman, the way the stock is going, if it keeps going up another maybe $15 or something, he could actually start losing money on this position. And of course, what he's also trying to do is think that all these fickle, flighty distributors that spook easily, and that's typically true in network marketing, are all going to scramble as soon as they hear all this stuff. But again, the Herbalife distributors, they're not leaving. So nothing he's doing is working. Like, I even thought about doing a little comic that kind of shows a picture of the Herbalife building and Bill Ackman throwing a sink at it, because that's what he's doing. He's throwing everything at him but the kitchen sink, and he can't get them to go down. He can't get anybody to investigate them, and it's just not working. So this attack really is on the whole industry.
And if Herbalife can prevail here, maybe it'll finally. I mean, Bainkow didn't succeed. Well, he did succeed. He actually did an extortion plot and got him to pay off, but ultimately he's back in prison now for that same thing. And now then Ackman isn't going to make any money off of it. Remember, he's owns 20 million shares. Every dollar that Herbalife stock goes up, he loses $20 million. And it's going back up now. So if these guys keep trying this and failing, maybe these other guys will stop trying to do this to network marketing companies.
Well, we're going to wrap this segment up. When we come back, I want to get into more of the conversation of how direct selling as a community can rally to push back against things like this. Because I happen to agree with you, it is not a USANA issue. It is not an Herbalife issue. It's not an Amway issue. It is a direct selling issue. And we need to be able to figure out a way to come together in support of our community, even if we are in different camps when we come back.
The Cash Flow Show, Direct Sales Radio. Host Deb Bixler brings you sales tips, lead generation systems, and best business practices that guarantee direct sales success. Whether you're looking for a little extra cash or a career change, the Cash Flow Show, Direct Sales Radio will give you proven systems that will work in your home business. The Cash Flow Show, every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. Pacific Time on World Talk Radio Variety.
When my mother used to sell Princess House.
Joined Amway that night.
Norma siempre vendía cosas de Avon.
Oh, it must have been around 1935.
But those knives were amazing.
The one lady's name was Mary Kay, and I said, cosmetics will never sell on party plan.
Was a single mom and created these hair care products for black women and became the first self-made millionaire in the United States. I just think that's extraordinary.
Welcome back to On Air with our special guest, Len Clements, CEO and founder of MarketWave, as we talk about this Herbalife issue with Ackman, the hedge fund manager, the very powerful hedge fund manager who owns Pershing Square Capital Management. What he's attempting to do, and Len explains it very, very well, is to use a short position with stocks to drive the value of Herbalife down so then he can make billions of dollars on top of it by reselling the stock. Unfortunately for Ackman, his strategy has not worked, much to the delight of the entire direct selling community. Len, one of the things that happens with these sort of events is it can cause a lot of friction. It can cause a lot of despair. And one of the things that kind of set the precedent for how we handle these things took place in 1975. In 1975, Amway was under attack by the FTC, who was attacking them for an illegal business model, what they were calling at the time a pyramid scheme. It was a 4-year process. Amway came out on top in 1979 with the FTC admitting it is a legitimate business model. If Amway had failed, we would have been looking at, an extinction level event for the entire direct selling community, because almost all of it would have gone by the wayside. With this event here, with Ackman and Herbalife, is it another potential extinction level event due to the impact of what he is doing in terms of the domino effect?
Well, you're right in that it absolutely was potentially an extinction level event back in the 70s with Amway, but they were operating under a very, very different model back then. The computers weren't handling all of the payouts in multi-level, so you bought product, and at a certain price, you resold it to your next level down and took a piece of it. Then they sold it to the next level down and took a piece of it. They sold it to the next level down and took a piece of it. That's why in that court case, by the way, they recognized sales to customers and wholesale sales to distributors as a valid retail sale, because they knew that you were selling it to your downline. So they recognized sales to distributors. Mm-hmm. If they would do as what Ackman is suggesting today, is not commission any sales sold to distributors, only sales sold to outside customers. You apply that to Amway in the 70s, and there's no business model. It falls apart.
Right.
But today, I think even worst case, this probably is not extinction level, because all that it would mean is that companies would have to have significant volumes of product to non-distributors. Mm-hmm. And, so let's say of the approximately 1,000 network marketing companies out there, and I'm talking about the ones with really brick and mortar home offices, shipping facilities, you count all the internet ones and stuff like that, it's up into the thousands. 800 to 1,000 MLM companies, probably the bottom half that has the least retailable product with the lowest intrinsic actual value would be wiped out. But the total number of distributors would probably be the same. Mm-hmm. So if they get compacted under half as many companies, correct, the average downline is twice as big. Right. I'm not sure that's going to hurt the industry. It might even help us let the cream rise to the top. But because you're going to really have to have really good, valuable, retailable products at a price that's commensurate to its value, so you can't have literally $49 bottles of fruit juice anymore. That wouldn't work under the new model. But again, if the FTC was going to take action on this, I think they would have by now. There's no indication that they are. If anything, Herbalife seems to be getting the higher ground on this. Other very well-known stock market gurus like Mr. Icahn and others have come to their defense and bought stock long, meaning they think they're going to go back up. Right. And the media even seems to be starting to turn a little bit in Herbalife's favor too, because they're starting to get it that Ackman is not into this for the reasons he said he was into it. They're starting to kind of see through that veneer of honor. That I'm doing this because it's blood money. I don't really want it. This isn't a happy thing. I'm making money on this. I just want to save all these distributors from this horrible pyramid scheme. I think they're starting to see through that a little bit.
Yeah, they're finally doing their homework, and they're realizing he is not coming from an altruistic place by any stretch of the imagination. In the article that's in the February edition of Direct Selling News, DSA President Joe Mariano went on to say this as he really started to lift the flag of awareness, or the warning flag. He goes on to say, "It is potentially the greatest threat we have seen in years to the goodwill, understanding, and progress that Direct Selling Association, Direct Selling Education Foundation, Direct Selling Companies, and many others," who he's meaning distributors, "have worked to create. This common danger is in what he is hoping brings forth some unity. Many members of the investment community, the press, academics, and others have seen through this motivation, something that you just mentioned, that is a blatantly self-interested short seller and has begun to look at the facts for a change. My concern is oftentimes as these things happen, direct sellers can begin to panic. You did mention that the resiliency of the Herbalife distributors, but as misinformation begins to filter out, and luckily for us, we're starting to see some of the truth rise to the top. What are some of the things from a direct selling standpoint that we need to be aware of? How do we remain vigilant with these types of actions? And what are the things that we need to do? Do we find out more about our companies? Do we contact the DSA? What do we do if you were in the position of sheriff for direct selling right now? How would you suggest we go about protecting ourselves?
One area is I always thought that we really need, as an industry, sort of a definitive clearinghouse of information where we not only support the industry but also defend the industry, because there's a very small but very prolific number of anti-MLM critics out there. If you Google the word MLM, 4 of the top 10 results are their sites. There's a very small handful of them, but like I said, it's kind of their full-time job to put all this misinformation about us. And no one really wants to defend ourselves against them and attack them based on their claims, because the attitude's always been, well, we don't want to give them more attention and make more people aware of them that otherwise wouldn't have been. That made sense before the internet. Now, if anybody's doing even any kind of due diligence on this industry, and they're Googling MLM or whatever, they're already seeing this anti-MLM propaganda. So you really should put that out there. Now, the DSA, for whatever reason, doesn't feel compelled to do that. The more distributor-centric trade associations, the ANMP, MLMIA, just don't have the means yet to really put that together. They basically need to be funded so they can just hire someone full-time to go do it.
Correct.
Because that's a huge job to take on a volunteer basis. So we just can't get that together. And, if we could, as an industry, get together and say, hey, look, you know what, I've put the offer out. I'll work on bare minimum to keep my lights on and some ramen, in the cabinet for 3 months. Just pay me whatever, $3,500 a month or whatever my minimum expenses are to just live. And if a bunch of companies want to get together and chip in $500 a month or whatever, I'll do that for 3 months and create that site, including all the content. No one's interested.
I've always thought, and I thought this very early on in my direct selling career, which is now going on 18 years, that there needed to be a creation of a marketing arm for direct selling, whose sole job was to market the goodwill of direct selling away and outside of the individual companies, so that when we have issues like this, the marketing department of direct selling could take place. Because I kind of look at direct selling like this. It's like any sports community. It could be the NBA, where you've got the Miami Heat, you've got the Lakers over here, you've got the Trailblazers here, you've got your Chicago Bulls over here. They're all battling each other constantly. But at the end of the day, they realize they're part of this great community, and we need to stick together. And we can do our fights inside. And this goes back to what you said in the earlier segment, that at times companies can celebrate the downfall of a company who's their rival. But at the end of the day, that's bad for all of us. We don't want to see anyone fail. We want to see us do well, even though you want to be the best, but you want to see the entire industry do well. I hear what you're saying on having someone who can do the footwork, who can do the groundwork of pushing back on all this. And I think what you're actually suggesting is not a bad idea at all. I think at some point it's going to need to be done. Because the DSA, in the article that Joe Mariano writes, he talks about that they already have begun to engage the DSA members, which are DSA companies, a little over 200 last time I checked. And we know there are hundreds of companies. And that they're already beginning to put their response together. Well, oftentimes they are a dollar short and a day late with everything. And if you're only going to talk to your member companies, you miss out on the largest pool of people who need the information to fight back with. What do you think?
No, I agree. I mean, they are beholden to their member companies, as they should be. They're a trade association representing those companies. If the companies don't want to pay to be a member, they probably shouldn't be included. I understand the business model of that. But, again, they are a trade association serving the entire industry. So even if it's an attack on a non-member company, which I've not seen yet, even if it was, it indirectly affects their member companies.
Right.
So I think that, but again, they claim there's 16 million distributors in the United States. I challenge that number only in that I think they're counting total distributorships, not individual active distributors. In other words, you get annual distributorships, and you sign up in January, quit in February, and join another company in March. DSA might count you twice.
Right.
I'm guessing there's about, I'd estimate more 10 or 11 million individual active distributors. Call it 10 million for easier math. 10 million of us. Understand, there are literally half a dozen anti-MLM critics out there. You go to the wiki entry for MLM, look up multi-level marketing, and look at the wiki page. it has become an anti-MLM site. It's not neutral anymore. It's totally beholden to a handful of anti-MLM editors, and they link to all of the anti-MLM sites. You put any reference to a pro site or even a neutral site, it'll get wiped out in literally minutes. So 10 million of us, half a dozen of them, half a dozen of these editors. I mean, do you understand that if 1% of 1% of the active distributors in this industry would go into the wiki page once a day and just make it neutral? By no means am I suggesting it should be a pro-MLM site. It should be balanced and neutral. If that's all we did, we would overwhelm those anti-MLM editors and make it a neutral site. We could do that, Keeper, overnight. Mm-hmm. I mean, the reason why the anti-MLM sites always link high on the search results is because the number of outside links to you is a major factor in how you rank. When there's only 6 anti-MLM sites, and there's all these people all over the world trying to make an anti-MLM case, they're all linking to the same 6 sites. The pro-MLM sites outnumber them 1,000 to 1. I mean, literally, there's 6,000, 10,000 pro-MLM sites out there, counting individual company sites. But then all the links to them are so defrayed and spread out that they don't get linked as high.
So do you think the DSA should come outside itself on this particular issue and possibly other issues? Because in the email to me, Joe Mariano did say, we're going to need all hands on deck. And all hands on deck are companies and people outside of the DSA in order to raise the voice that we are concerned, and in order to take this to our political leaders and our legislators to help them understand who we are so that they can, in effect, be advocates for us when it comes to issues like this.
Every company, every distributor, member of DSA or not, everybody's got to look at this and take part in the defense of the industry and support of the industry. If, God forbid, I don't think this will happen, but if it did, the FTC comes in and says, Herbalife, we're going to apply that old archaic 94 Webster versus Omnitrition decision, which is another whole show. I can debunk that. But the Ninth Circuit Court, the most overturned appeals court in U.S. history, the one that said the Pledge of Allegiance was unconstitutional, that appeals court, said back in 1994, in case of Omnitrition, only products sold to outside customers are commissionable, not the ones purchased by distributors. It's basically the only legal precedent. It was dicta. It wasn't even law. It was just overturned a summary judgment in favor of Omnitrition, sent it back to the lower court. They settled. Omnitrition is still in business to this day. People forget to mention that. But anyway, that use it against us. But if that we're going to apply that now. Herbalife can only commission sales to non-distributors. Purchases by distributors, not commissionable. I challenge every distributor and every MLM company out there, DSA member or not, think what happens to your company if you apply that to your company. Personal purchases by distributors, not commissionable. Only retail sales to non-distributors are commissionable. How does that affect your company? Now, do you think you should maybe support Herbalife on this?
Those could be absolutely devastating results. Len, in order to stay on top of this, and for those who want to, how do they follow you? How do they keep up with you in all of this? Because you and I, will continue to talk about this as the year goes along. But I want people to be aware that you are someone who's very much on top of all of this, particularly any of the legal issues that take place in direct selling.
Yeah, well, you go to my old website address, which is marketwaveinc.com, still works. It'll redirect to my new site. My site got sabotaged a few months ago, which is another long, ugly story. My web developer got arrested by the FBI, and his site got destroyed. But anyway, all of his customer sites got destroyed. But it's back now with a more up-to-date, like WordPress site. That's Inside NM, like Inside Network Marketing, InsideNM.com. In the article section, you actually find a response that I wrote about, I think about an 18-page response to Bill Ackman and his attack on Herbalife, with all of the facts defining why I don't believe his attack is really legitimate and so forth, and what's really behind it and things like that. So there's a whole report on there about that in the article section.
Have you ever thought about possibly creating a petition where you get support from distributors just so they're aware of it, possibly putting together a petition that says, I support what you're talking about, or creating something along those lines?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good idea, and I can certainly do that, but man, isn't that a job of a trade association?
But we know what the trade associations are going to do. The trade associations are going to drag their feet. The DSA is, first of all, they're going to step back and say, does this make sense from not only a public policy standpoint, but from a standpoint of how we are viewed.
Yeah.
They're attorneys over there. They're politicians. The MLMIA, as you said, is not quite big enough. The association that you're with is not big enough. That they just don't have the resources. Neither is DSWA. But there are times when the individual needs to step up and take the reins. This might be one of those things. I don't know of anyone better for it than you.
Yeah. If I can find a way to monetize this, I'd be richer than Bill Ackman, actually. But no, this MLM advocacy thing doesn't pay very well, like at all. So unfortunately, I do have to keep ramen in the cabinet and the lights on. So yeah, it's only so much I can do pro bono, which I think is Latin for schmuck. That before I have to actually go make a living. But what your concept absolutely is a good idea. I just wish there's somebody else out there that could actually help out a little, with this cause. But I know certainly you do. I do. For the record, by the way, I should give them credit. Brett Matheny, the attorney Kevin Thompson,
Mm-hmm.
who's the third guy? Mel Atwood. These three guys have contributed financially to help me create stuff to defend the industry, which I'm still in the process of doing. I can't do it full time, so it takes longer to get done. But there are people out there who are proactively trying in any way they can to help create this type of defense website or whatever it might be. So there are some of us out there doing this, but we need a lot more help.
Okay, well, we'll look to put the word out. Len, it's been great having you on. Any last words on how people can contact you outside of the website? Phone number, email, Facebook, Twitter. How can they contact you?
Sure. Yeah, I am on Twitter under MWave, which is short for Market Wave, and you can also call me anytime. Give you the free voicemail number here, 800-688-4766, or you can email me at mwave and the number 1 at cox.net, cox.net.
Okay. We'll be talking to you once again in about the next 3 or 4 weeks as we watch this entire case unfold. Len, have a great day. Thanks for coming on and talk about this. It's going to be imperative that we talk about this as much as possible, because this is how we put pressure, unlike you said, or not like you said, but this is how we put pressure on associations like the DSA to do their job.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it, Keeper.
Take care. Bye-bye. Welcome back to On Air. I want to thank Len Clements for coming in today to talk about it. This whole Herbalife Ackman issue. It is a major, major issue. It is one that none of us can sleep on. There's not one distributor that this would not affect, not one company that this would not affect. And also keep in mind the vendors, the suppliers that provide business and services to every direct selling company. We're talking about not just here in the United States, we're talking about a global effect that could be absolutely devastating to our industry. Hedge fund managers now beginning to look at the publicly owned direct selling companies as a way to make billions of dollars for themselves, regardless of the impact that it will have on millions of families who are in direct selling, millions of individuals who are in direct selling. And keep in mind, the extension of those families, we're talking about people being able to just pay their rent. We're talking about people being able to pay their house note, people being able to do any number of things. I'm going to read to you as I close out today, Direct Selling News for February 2013, as Direct Selling Association President Joe Mario wrote a very, very great article on this subject. Direct Selling News does not go out to distributors. It only goes out to management. However, I think as this battle begins to unfold, and luckily it seems as though the tide is turning for us here in direct selling, that we need to be very, very vigilant. It is quite apparent that what is happening can easily be repeated. I'm just going to read some of the things that he had to say, this being Joe Mariano. He goes on to say, as I mentioned earlier, it is potentially the greatest threat we have seen in years to the goodwill, understanding, progress that Direct Selling Association, Direct Selling Education Foundation, Direct Selling Companies, and many others have worked to create. Because he's talking to management, he left out distributors in that particular comment. I'm also going to throw in the threat to distributors and their families, because at the end of the day, that's the greatest threat, because without distributors, these companies, the DSA, the Direct Selling Association and its foundation, does not exist. He left that out. I'm putting that in. He also goes on to say there is now a common danger that has arisen, born from an unlikely source called the short seller. Yes, it is a common danger, but in it being a common danger, Joe Mariano needs to talk about the danger to direct selling distributors, as I just mentioned. The insidious part of this strategy comes into play when the short investor and their cohorts decide to try to manipulate the market to make stock prices go down instead of letting the marketplace perform its normal function. That is where the misinformation, misrepresentation, and a common danger comes into play. One hedge fund that has taken a short position, and he does not mention them, but I'm going to mention it, is it's Pershing Square Capital Management. That's me adding this. And the hedge fund manager that he's talking about, of course, is Bill Ackman. One hedge fund that has taken a short position on a major direct selling company, that being Herbalife, rather than assess the relative strength and weaknesses of that company in the marketplace, make appropriate investments, and let the market work, this celebrity-level investor staged his own PR attack, with the obvious intention of creating a self-fulfilling prophecy. It is his effort to drive down stock prices. This short let loose a wrong-headed cacophony of allegations and misstatements, the law and practice. I'm sorry, I really screwed this up. I need to roll back on this. What he says is, in his effort to drive stock prices down, this short let loose a wrong-headed cacophony of allegations and misrepresentations. We're going to come back to this. Okay. One hedge fund that has taken a short position, and I'm going to add this. This is Pershing Square Capital Management, and the hedge fund manager that he's talking about is Bill Ackman. One hedge fund that has taken a short position on a major direct selling company, that being Herbalife, rather than assess the relative strength and weaknesses of the company in the marketplace, make appropriate investments, and let the market work, this celebrity-level investor, Bill Ackman, staged his own PR attack with the obvious intention of creating a self-fulfilling prophecy. That is so he could rake in billions. In this effort to drive stock prices down, this short let loose a wrong-headed cacophony of allegations and misstatements of law and practice about direct selling and pyramid schemes. Some financial analysts and press have picked up these allegations as fact, and many of the outdated myths of direct selling and multi-level marketing have been repeated by these unknowing observers. Many members of the investment community, the press, academics, and others have finally begun to see through the motivations of this blatantly self-interested self-seller and begun to look at the facts. The common danger remains, however, because for the investors, there is much money at stake here. And I'm going to add, the money that we are talking about is billions. I mean billions of dollars, and this is with the domino effect. If one gets away with it, we are all in trouble. Joe Mariano goes on to say, most direct selling companies are not publicly traded and are somewhat less vulnerable to the specific tactics of these short sellers. Nonetheless, the misstatements and misunderstanding about direct selling channel will continue to echo. And it is incumbent upon the DSA and the entire industry, including distributors. I'm adding the distributors once again. It's incumbent upon the DSA and the entire industry to respond effectively, consistently, accurately at these false allegations about our channel. The DSA and its members have begun to engage in a multifaceted strategy to respond. It will be sharing more details with DSA members. I'll stop there. It's not enough to say you're going to share the strategies with DSA members. Direct sellers themselves, distributors, need to be aware of what the strategies are. At the end of the day, we are the best messengers for direct selling because we will have prospects and customers begin to read all of the news from Bill Ackman and Herbalife and begin to question them, the distributors, directly. Direct sellers need to be aware of what the strategy is and how they play into this picture. The strategy already is underway. It involves a number of things. Aiming our members with accurate information and rebuttals to the possible charges. Continued data gathering and research in support of the industry. Outreach to major press outlets to better inform these opinion shapers. Outreach to lawmakers at the federal and state levels to preempt any possible misguided legal efforts to regulate or even prohibit legitimate direct selling. Pursuit of effective anti-pyramid law that clearly defines pyramids and makes clear our legitimacy. Mobilization of almost 16 million Salesforce members to speak in support of the industry. If you've already started, it's about time you let the 16 million plus know what's going on. Identification of those non-direct selling opinion and thought leaders who support direct selling and understand its importance to the American community. Education of the financial community as well. The Non-Direct Selling Association opinion members and thought leaders, of course, he's talking about people like Direct Selling Live and MLM Black Women and on there because we are not members of the DSA. However, there are efforts that they have in place that we fully support. This is, of course, one of them. Senior leadership of the DSA companies understand this common danger and have come together to respond. He goes on to end it with this. Union is strength, which is an interesting way to end it, considering that most direct selling companies could care less about unions. But at the end of the day, union in this sense is united. United we stand, united we fall. It's going to be incumbent, as he said, to use his words, it's going to be incumbent upon everyone in direct selling to be aware. We must show constant vigilance with efforts like this to bring us down. Herbalife is one of our great companies. And if Herbalife goes down, the domino effect could be devastating. I hope all of you remain vigilant. I hope all of you stay on top of what is going on with the Herbalife situation and forget the fact that they may be a company that is not associated with you. This is about community. This is about unity. With that said, have a great day, have a great weekend, and we will see you next week. Remember, unity is strength. Goodbye.